So as you can tell from my title, we're going to be talking about biologicals, specifically, are they ready for the draft? Are they going to be in the major leagues? Are they still in the minor leagues? Or should they be looking for another year of college eligibility? So, by show of hands, how many people have seen this chart over the past year? Or been to a biologicals talk? Yeah, the majority of you. You're probably sick and tired of seeing it, right? Well, whenever I first, found out I was going to be working with biologicals, I was really excited. Got to the University of Illinois. Dr. Sybil emails me this. I'm like, what am I going to be working with? I open it, and immediately I'm overwhelmed, right? This is a whole list, the ag biological landscape. It was how many companies made biological products back in 2023. So like I said, it's a big headache. It's a lot to work through. So agronomists, farmers are like, it's a lot, right? Well, then in 2025, I've been waiting for a new list to come out. I'm like, maybe the list will shrink. It'll be a lot easier to look through. And then Dr. Sybil emails me a couple of weeks ago, and he's like, hey, there's a new list. And I'm like, yes, it's going to be great. It's going to be smaller. No, I got bigger, right? So it's even more overwhelming to look at, okay? So, like I said, these are all the companies. So each of these companies, how many of them actually only make one product, right? So now your list is, 3 times the size of what it already is. So, how we relate this to baseball, right? So when MLB teams are scouting for players, they probably look at the top 5 college baseball teams in the U.S. And of course, I'm not biased in any way. But Murray State is a baseball school now, in case you didn't know. But if you have a small draft pool, it's really easy to build a team. So if you have a small, range of biologicals, it's going to be a lot easier to choose them, right? Well, with that other list, the pool gets really big, right? You're pulling from all these different colleges, all these great players. So when you have a bigger pool, it's much harder to build a team. So with this, we've kind of established what the biological market looks like. But the big question is, what exactly are biologicals? When I call my mom on the phone and I tell her I'm working with them, she's like, I have no idea what that is. So what are they? So in this crop physiology laboratory, we grouped them into 3 categories. So plant growth regulators, beneficial microbes, as well as biostimulants. So, how does the industry define them? This is how we define them. The industry defines them as a substance or microorganism that is somehow, mitigating stress, enhancing nutrient use efficiency, or nutrient uptake. But this is kind of a definition that's still in progress. But also I'd like to point out, just keep this in mind, the highlighted part, right? It says nothing about crop growth, okay? So, back to our list. So which one of those 3 things don't really fit that definition? So plant growth regulators. They don't really fit within, there's nothing about plant growth in that definition, so we kind of, X those out. But like I said, this definition is still in progress, so what are the groups that are actually working towards making, defining them better? The BPIA, as well as the Biostimulant Coalition, as well as the Fertilizer Institute, also known as TFI. So with TFI, I don't know if you guys have seen if any of your biological jugs have had this little, marker on them, but the certified biostimulant, this is an approach to try to help farmers navigate through this biological market, right? So if they have this sticker, TFI is saying, okay, you should be able to use this with some success, right? And I really hope this is not like one of those pay-to-play situations where it's just a label on it to try and get you to buy it. But I'm also not saying, don't trust it if it has it, but I'm also not saying if it doesn't have it, you shouldn't be using it. So some other groups that are using this, Winfield United has a bio-verified design or designation that they use. So it's a series of characteristics that they go through and are able to label the biologicals as those. So what exactly are biologicals? Once again, our definition. So Dr. Favaretto kind of talked about this. But like I said, plant growth regulators, there's more regulation with them, so we won't talk about those. But beneficial microbes, the living organisms, which is what I work with, and then biostimulants, which are considered dead. So with these, like an example, living would be like your bradyrhizobium or your arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi, and then biostimulants would be like humic or fulvic acids. So I like to relate this a lot to, I have dogs at home, so you gotta keep the dogs happy, keep them thriving, you gotta feed them, everything else like that. And apparently, according to Dr. Bilo, kids are kind of the same way, but I'll take his word for it because I don't have any kids. But same thing with biologicals. You gotta keep them happy, you gotta keep them living, in order for them to thrive. So with this, biologicals, how are they going to fit into our agronomic inputs? So who are the key players on your roster of agronomic inputs? So these are veteran players. These are guys that you don't want to draft anybody to replace them. So the first one would be your seed, right? You have to have a good foundation, a good variety, a good hybrid, or else nothing that you add is even going to matter at that point. So then our second veteran player is fertility. So you have to have, in order to back up your seed, your good variety, your good hybrid, you got to have fertility. Our third one is pest management. So this is, you've established, you're establishing a good yield with your seed, with your fertility program, but then you got to protect that later in season with fungicide or insecticide. And then our fourth one that's not really talked about a whole lot is specialty products, okay? So where exactly can biologicals fit into that? Well, I like to think that they're going to be able to fit into that specialty products category. They're not meant to replace any of your good foundational agronomic inputs, right? And I'm not saying, in the future maybe they could, but as of right now, I haven't seen a biological that's going to completely replace your fertility program or your pest management program overall. So, how do we actually scout for a good biological or a good player to add to your operation? So that's when we get into qualities of a good draft pick. So for any MLB team, they're looking for a few key things. So first would be good batting average. Next would be speed, that they're adaptable so you can play in multiple situations. And then also cooperative, so they have to be able to work as a team with the players that you already have. So how does this correlate to biologicals? Well, with biologicals, good batting average would be, does it yield consistently? Year after year, is it still working as it should? Speed was how quick is the response. So also a lot of biologicals are sometimes marketed as a way to improve soil health, but how exactly, how fast are those working? Is it working 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years? You have to be able to figure out the time limit on that. So then also adaptable. Can it work in more than one environment? Can it work with more than one variety or hybrid? And also, with cooperation, will it work with the rest of your team with those inputs that you're already putting in? So how do we scout for this, right? So I call it the CPL spring training. So we're scouting for the best biologicals in the business. So how exactly has the crop physiology laboratory gone about doing this? Well, this is where my thesis project comes in. So it's funded by the United Soybean Board, and it's a soybean biologicals project. And so what exactly is the big question we're trying to answer with this? So it's where, when, and how we can use a biological product for the best chance of success. So how we did this, our research approach, we looked at 3 different locations in Illinois. So we looked at down south in Nashville, which is kind of around my area, and then in Champaign, so central Illinois, as well as in northern Illinois in Yorkville. So notice what's the biggest difference on this chart that you can see. pH, okay, they're all around the same. CEC, Nashville's a little lower, but especially organic matter is the big thing here, right? So, I moved up to central Illinois last May, and, down south, we have a joke that you guys can just toss out corn to get 300 bushels. You gotta work a little harder. But I moved up here, and the first soil sample I take looks like this. And immediately I'm angry. I'm like, okay, why can't we have this down south? But then, most people don't believe me. But that's down south. So big difference here, organic matter. So we're trying to see, will a biological work better when you have more inherent soil fertility or when you have less? So another layer that we added onto this was we looked at 2 different varieties, or 2 agronomic managements. So we looked at 2 agronomic managements, so one pre-plant management, which meant we did standard management, had no pre-plant fertility added, and then progressive management, we did 17.5 pounds of nitrogen as well as 20 pounds of sulfur in the form of AMS. And then in season, we also had an R3 application of Mirvis Top and Indigo ZC for our progressive management, and then standard management also had no foliar protection. So once again, we're trying to see, are biologicals going to work better whenever you're putting everything into them, or can they, work on their own and be that replacement? So also with this, we added in 2 varieties. So like I said, we were trying to figure out, are they adaptable? Can they work in more than one environment? Can they work with more than one variety? So we chose Asgrow, as well as a genetically distinct hybrid against Asgrow, which is Golden Harvest. So then also with this, we're screening 10 different biological products. So like I said, we're trying out the full Monty here. We're leaving no rock unturned. We're going to try to, in every way possible, figure out where biologicals are going to work. So how exactly did we narrow it down to 10 products, right? I just showed you that gigantic list. And you're like, okay, how do you actually narrow down out of that huge list? Well, Dr. Sybil last year conducted a survey of 155 biological products. And out of these, there was 139 unique microbial species. So from this, what exactly do they do? 82%, or out of the 155 products surveyed, 82% of those were for crop nutrition, 9% were for residue management, 5% were for plant growth, 3% were soil inoculants, and 1% were drought tolerance. So I'd like to really focus in on the 82% were crop nutrition. So that's kind of where we're looking into as well. So with that, we narrowed down our list. We looked at our 2024 treatments. So for our products, we had first up Lolifix Pro Yield and MicroSurge. So also it's important when you're choosing these biologicals, what exactly is their function that they're doing in the field. So with these, they do nitrogen fixation on the root. Next would be Biopath and Phos-N. So these are nutrient solubilizers. Our next treatment was Mycosol and Simvato. And these are root extenders. And then Invita and Nutrition N which are nitrogen fixation within the plant, so they're infixing endophytes. And then we also had invigorate and jumpstart, which I like to say they're the jack of all trades, but their primary function is that they are primarily P solubilizers. So how exactly do we apply these? So 5 of ours were seed treatment. I know Dr. Favaretto talked a lot about seed treatment. 3 of these were via in-furrow, and then 2 of these were applied via foliar application. Also, so how do we set up this study? So you may be thinking, okay, how are we actually going to find out if they work? So in the field, we set up in this is a large study, by the way. It's 480 plots at 3 sites. So it's over 1,400 plots in total. So in this, our management, we looked at standard management, so it's in one block. And then progressive management was our next block. And then standard again. And then progressive again. So then within these blocks, we also blocked it by variety. So Asgrow in one block and Golden Harvest in the other. So then, okay, so now we're looking at this. So how are we going to break these up and look at the biologicals even further? So within this, in each block, progressive and standard management, we have a split design. So you have a treated plot and an adjacent control plot, so it's pairwise. And then in each of those managements, we have that as well. So you're testing one biological product across both varieties, treated versus control. So why do we do this? Well, it's to reduce infield variability. So nobody can say we didn't try to, reduce it within a field. So if you have one treated plot, well, if your control plot is all the way across the field, you can't really compare the two, right? So we tried to narrow that down so we could get the best response. So overall, I wanted to kind of see how biologicals worked as a whole in both varieties. So average across all biologicals, I looked at the 3 different locations across the 2 varieties. And as you can see, Asgrow didn't really show some consistencies in data. But with our Golden Harvest variety, you can see as we move up in inherent soil fertility, it worked better in a standard management system. So, your biologicals not added in progressive, but just by themselves. And in some places, like Nashville, it even seemed to decrease yield. And also with these values, you're looking at, okay, like 2.5, that's bushels. That's the treated versus the control. So if it's a positive number, that means your biological did better than the control plot. If it's a negative number, that means that it did worse. So we want the positive number. So if we can break this down even further, we can look at, the biological response by product. So in this, right, it's a big headache to look at. It's a lot. So this is why I like to break it down into Christmas tree colors. And also I'm just preparing you because if you walk in any store in the near future, there's Christmas decorations up, so preparing you in advance. But looking at both of these, right off the bat, you can see there's a lot of red in the progressive, right? So looking at standard, what really sticks out is in the champagne area, right? Seeing a lot of green, okay? And then also within this, which product did the best? So Invita and Nutrition N, so those infixing endophytes, those foliars. So, and also I like to point out with this, you're not seeing any drastic yield bumps or yield swings from using biologicals, right? It's a 1 or 2 bushel swing. So it's hard to justify, yes, you should be purchasing a product and using it, but you're only getting a 1 to 2 bushel swing. So what can we really take away from all of this? The location management and variety influence biological effectiveness, but there's a lot of questions that still need to be answered. Like I said, this is the first year of this study. We implemented it again this year. Growing conditions are different, so excited to see what happens. But also, biologicals are expanding rapidly. They're going to continue growing unless some sort of regulation comes out to reduce that market size. But farmer adoption and product options is key. So like I said, a lot of times, the only way you're going to find out if it works is if you actually use it on your farm yourself instead of going through like this. Then also the most important point is that these products are a next step input. They will not fix the major challenges you have, and they should not be a replacement for the good agronomic management that you're already doing. And also you should probably, if you're going to implement them, know exactly what the microbe does. Is it a P solubilizer? Is it something to help with residue decomposition? Those are all things you have to think about before adding them into your program. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your attention today. And also I have a report that's on our website that details the biologicals more by management and variety if you'd like to see that too. But thank you.